Well, I'm really pleased to welcome you back to Brighton, Vajradevi, and to have the opportunity to introduce you to the Sangha here and further afield. We've got people from all over the place. I've been going on retreat with Vajradevi for 10 or more years now, and she's become both my teacher and my friend. Vajradevi's a very adventurous, sometimes reckless person. She's courageous, kind, and generous woman, and her life exemplifies this. So you may have heard about her trips to Burma, where she spent altogether up to a year studying in Burma, but she also was very involved with setting up our ordination retreat centre for women in the remote and very beautiful part of the mountains in Spain, and many other things. Yeah, she's all those things. But what inspires me about Vajradevi is how I have witnessed her understanding and practice of mindfulness deepen and develop. She studied under many teachers, including Sangharakshita and her Burmese teacher, U Tejaniya, and they are to be heard in her teaching. They come through. But over the years, her own voice has been coming through more and more clearly. And it's this voice which is now manifesting itself in the publication of her book, Uncontrived Mindfulness, which we're going to hear a bit more about tonight. So I'm going to leave you now to Vajradevi to speak for herself. But trust me, you're in very good hands tonight. Thank you, Vajradevi.
Thank you, Dharma Vasita. Thank you. Okay, Okay, good. Just have to remember to not stare at myself in that slightly disconcerting way that Zoom does, but stare at you all instead. So I'm just maybe say what the format for the evening will be, just so that you know where we're going. So I'm going to talk for a while, maybe 35, 40 minutes or so, and then we'll sit and I'll guide you into a sit. I may guide it right the way through, see how it goes. And then we'll have a little break, just a little leg stretch. And then rather than, I think sometimes you have breakout rooms, but rather than that, there'll just be an opportunity for you to ask any questions of me that you would like to, or make any comments. And then I think be a couple of little things on the end, maybe a mantra if we have time, and some adverts. So that's what we'll be doing. So I'm really delighted to be here. It's a while since I've been in Brighton, as it were. I came quite regularly for a period of time, and I think when I moved to Shrewsbury, that became a bit more difficult. I think when I was living in Cambridge until about 4 or 5 years ago, and then moving that much further, sort of north and west, was a bit further away from Brighton. But I still come to Rivendell, so I'm sort of not that far away, at least a couple of times a year. Yes, so I've written a book. I've written a book about what I teach, so this is it. For the first few launches, I didn't actually have a copy. I just had these things that I'd printed out, but now I have not only, well, I have 10 copies. Wintle sent me 10 copies, which is very nice, and I can give them away to various people. And my family who sponsored the book, I have quite a large family, and they've been telling me, oh, I've got the book, and my dad and 2 sisters, and I'm thinking, what on earth are you going to make of it? You know nothing about meditation, nothing about Buddhism, but I'm really delighted. So it feels lovely, actually, this sort of a lot of flow around the book, and it's caught me. I think at first I just didn't quite know what to make of it, and I didn't feel particularly excited, but you know, then family and then friends would sort of send me pictures or WhatsApp with them holding the book or the book on their shrine. So it's all been very lovely, actually. So I want to say a little bit about the content, I suppose, the content of what the book is about. So it's primarily, it's a meditation method, but it's come from the Satipatthana Sutta, one of many ways in which the Buddha's teaching on mindfulness can be practiced. And many of you will know that the Satipatthana Sutta is not just about meditation. There's a lot of Dharma in there. There's a lot of Dharma teachings. So there's that combination, which I would say is, for me, the essence of the practice, and the essence of what I've written about is mindfulness or awareness, and the wisdom element, right view or Dharma perspective. And the very potent combination, I think, when those two things come together, when mindfulness is informed by wisdom, the wisdom perspective. So that's one pair. That's another thing that I've tried to emphasize, and that I think is emphasized in mindfulness particularly, is we're looking more at direct experience. Rather than thinking about something. So there's that what can be known directly or more directly, because I think direct experience is always a process, depending on the quality of the awareness or the quality of the mind that is able to recognize what's happening. So I don't think it's as simple just as we either are with our direct experience or we're with thinking about experience. But we can make that distinction. So this is an approach that emphasizes wisdom, it emphasizes clear seeing. And that was one of the things that really caught my attention, caught my interest in all the practice that I'd done around Satipatthana, around mindfulness. It was with this sort of almost an extra sort of shift with the wisdom element becoming much more central, that really excited me, really interested me. Another thing I found really helpful was that mindfulness in this context is very receptive. It's undirected. And that's not always the case, because we have, say, the mindfulness of breathing, where we direct the attention, we direct the energy towards the breath or towards a different object in other practices. But here, it's predominantly receptive to whatever is happening, rather than seeking out particular objects to pay attention to. So sometimes I talk about it as the practice of watching the mind. And in fact, I sometimes also quote Bhante, who I once heard say in a very large context, I think it was a convention, saying we should be watching our minds all of the time. And that's well, I'll come on to that a little bit later, but that place of continuity, the place of, what does it mean to watch the mind all the time? It places very high value on a continuity of mindfulness, continuity of awareness. So maybe just to say a few words about how to locate this the practice I'm going to be talking about within our Triratna context. So firstly within the context of the mandala of God, I forgot what it's called. That's terrible. The mandala of the 5 practices. It's the best I can do, I'm afraid, for now. So we've got integration, we've got positive emotion. I do know what they are, just not what they're called. Spiritual rebirth. So that's 3 out of the 5. And if you like that, I think they're maybe the trailing edges. They're in there in this practice, but they're not the sort of leading edges. So what leads is spiritual receptivity. That's the method. The method is very much about spiritual receptivity. And where we're headed, or the results, if you like, are in the territory of spiritual death, which is often talked about as insight. I actually slightly prefer spiritual death, just in this context anyway. Partly because you just can't know when the conditions are right for insight to unfold. You just can't know. But what we're doing in the practice, if you like, is allowing conditions to be put in place, so that at some point, spiritual death or clear seeing is able to happen, and happen on different levels. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the 3 levels of wisdom. So yeah, we can talk about moments of insight on any, well, particularly the 2nd level and the 3rd level, through having the right information or the right Dharma perspective. So maybe one more way to locate it within our context is the main undirected practice that we do is just sitting. So yeah, there it's a very receptive way of practicing. I believe that Subhuti, this is quite well known, said that when Bhante taught him the just sitting practice, he said that just when you sit, just sit, or just know that you're sitting. I think he said, when you sit, just know that you're sitting. So very, very simple practice, but very profound as well. And certainly the way that Subhuti has talked about it, I found very, very inspiring. But Satipatthana practice, I'd say, is different in that it has if you like, more sort of hooks to hang things on, if you like. There are more words, there are more concepts, but they're pointing towards what it means to be mindful, what it means to be aware with right view. So I'm going to talk mainly about 4 things related to right mindfulness, what the Buddha called right mindfulness. So mindfulness at its most developed, where it does include a wisdom aspect. I think there's a couple of these 4 factors that are perhaps more strongly related to wisdom, but I think that right mindfulness, it's a factor of the Noble Eightfold Path already. There's wisdom within that, but as I said, I think it shows up more strongly in some facets and less in others. So I go into these in detail in chapter 2 of the book. So quite near the beginning, we're really looking at what mindfulness is, what the Buddha was talking about at mindfulness at its most developed. So the first thing, very simple, really simple. So mindfulness always happens in the present moment. So maybe while I'm talking, you can, sometimes you might be able to connect with this. So without trying to do anything, just simply settle back now. Just allow yourself to, if you like, inhabit the body a little bit more. Sometimes when we're listening, energy sort of goes to the head and maybe there's a leaning forward, or but actually just allow yourself to really settle back and maybe notice that your hands are touching if they're touching, or notice what you're sitting on. So you have that sense of simply knowing what is happening, and the body is always there to be known in some shape or form. So we can notice what's happening, body and mind, in quite a natural way. So this mindfulness in the present moment feels natural. We're not interfering or trying to have a particular sort of experience or make something happen. Not trying to change the experience that we're having. Yes, for example, with your breathing, just breathing as it is in the moment. That might be quite shallow. It might be, quite varied. So you breathe, and then you need to take a little top-up one, which I find quite often, especially when I'm talking. So just being present with that, with what's happening. So often we are caught in the past and in the future, and particularly through our thinking mind, the thinking, imagining, different memories, senses of anticipation. So a lot of mind stuff might be triggered by a physical sensation, a pain in the knee that makes us remember the hospital visit coming up next month or something. So we go between body and mind really fast, actually. And awareness can go there too. If we are mindful in the present moment, we can notice both what's happening in the body and also what's happening in the mind. And the sort of mindfulness, the quality of mindfulness that we're looking for has this settled back, relaxed, natural presence. There's a spaciousness to it, spaciousness and openness. Okay, so second thing, the quality of energy or effort that we use is crucial. And we want to use the minimum effort that we can use and still be present. And that's because we want to keep a continuity of mindfulness. If we use a lot of energy, we'll run out. But it's also because it doesn't actually take much energy to be mindful, to be aware. I think it's Analio who says sometimes mindfulness can take the place of effort, or sometimes right mindfulness can take the place of right effort. So we can think of becoming more mindful rather than using more energy or more effort. And particularly, I think if you find, as we all do, that perhaps you got a bit lost in thoughts, lost in some sort of story. And then often the reflex action can be to try a bit harder, to put a bit more energy in. Whereas actually it's more pleasant and sometimes more effective, a lot of the time more effective, to simply relax into awareness, relax into presence. In fact, just noticing that you've been caught up in a story or something, when you notice that, you're actually already present again. You're already there. And what you are noticing is that moment after you've noticed. So what's happening then? What's happening in that moment? No need to go back to anywhere. There's no particular thing to be aware of, except what's happening in this particular moment. So you notice the mind in that moment, post-story moment. And then what next? What else? What else is happening? There's the body. So you notice what's obvious and what's immediately accessible to awareness in that moment. And you notice it with a small amount of energy or effort as you can, while still staying present. Bhante talks about a consistent practice of mindfulness outside of meditation will do far more to overcome hindrances than anything we do once we get on the cushion. So just taking that sense of mindfulness into whatever we do in our daily lives. We'll pick up on hindrances, we'll pick up on defilements in the mind much more quickly if we're aware or mindful of the cushion. So I think of this quality of energy or effort. Well, in fact, it is how it's sometimes translated in quite strong words like diligence or things that imply a sort of strenuous effort. But actually, it's more commonly translated as things like patience, perseverance, and steadiness. So they have a different feel to them. A steady application of mindfulness, patiently persisting. So on retreat, so many of you will have done this. Those of you who've been on retreat, me holding up my hand, but you don't need to hold up yours. But I want to get you to put your hands with maybe your fingers touching and perhaps the edges of your palms touching. So you're not a prayer sort of mudra, but just so you've got a sense of sensations, and then you can make and break that contact just in your own time. And just noticing how much effort or energy it takes to be able to notice, to be aware of those sensations as you remake the contact. Anybody think it takes a lot of effort? Well, nobody on page 1. Sorry, guys, I can't see what's happening on page 2. But actually, generally people think it takes very little or no energy almost. But what it does take is just being present, and that's what we're training the mind to do. We're training ourselves to remember to be aware, reminding ourselves to just come to the present moment. So one thing with this continuity of mindfulness, and it's to do, I think, with sometimes things happen fast, and we think, how can I be aware of that? In daily life, sometimes we might think, but things are happening too fast. How can I notice that? I think sometimes then we need to just allow for awareness to be different in different situations and different occasions. So it might be that the awareness is quite broad, there's less detail filled in, but that we're still present, we're present with what's happening. But an image I've been using a lot recently, if you like, which shows the flexibility and the speed of the mind and how much it can pick up, is that of a pianist. So before lockdown, I used to regularly go to Symphony Hall in Birmingham, and they've got amazing world-class classical music concerts. Sometimes there'd be a pianist with the orchestra. I don't play the piano, but listening to the pianist, the fingers were incredibly fast, and actually if you relax, just settle back, the mind can take in that information. I mean, forget about the fingers, that's another level of amazement, but the mind is able to just take in every note if we're present to what's happening. That's the crucial thing. And it can do it effortlessly. Again, it doesn't take effort to do that, just to be present. effortless hearing. Hearing is happening. Maybe one last thing about this second quality, this quality of effort, and this is probably the one I'll say most about, is that it has an emotional quality too. It's a quality of engagement and curiosity and enthusiasm. So it's not a sort of technical thing, if you like. There's actually the continuity comes, the quality of energy, of that persistence. It may be quiet and patient, but it's engaged. It has interest in it. So it's like a feeling mindfulness rather than doing mindfulness, as a feeling quality. So the third thing is acceptance of what is happening. And acceptance brings contentment and happiness to the mind, even when what we're accepting is unwanted and unpleasant, perhaps. So I think acceptance is a wisdom quality. It's not accepting in the sense of resignation or the sense of stoicism. And it's not accepting something as being the end of the story. Oh, it's going to be like this. It's always like this. It's not a passive quality, but it's willing to be with what's happening as it happens. So it's not resisting things that are already there, if you like. If there's a pain in the body, then it's already there. We all know our second arrow. If we resist, actually it makes it worse. We've got a mental pain as well as a physical pain. So acceptance has the power to really transform our experience. I go into in part of what I'm doing in the book. I've got I write a blog. I've been writing this blog for 4 or 5 years, and so I mainly am writing about what I'm writing about how I work with the practice in my own life. And most of the times it's off the cushion, so it's within my daily life. And so I wrote what I'm calling a mindful life moment for each of the chapters in the book. And one of them is about implant surgery. So being at the dentist and spending about an hour and a half in the chair, having an implant put in. And even implant surgery can be interesting and actually okay. It wasn't particularly pleasant, but certainly there was a degree of acceptance in the mind in that experience that was okay. And that partly came from watching things like fear arise, or watching the cramping in the jaw, or watching the resistance to the experience. That too can be known in awareness. So it's not that it all has to go away, and actually you can, if you like, the quality of the mind that's watching what's happening is different to what's being observed. So the quality of mindfulness feels different to the quality of fear or of resistance. And we can sort of lean more into that quality of mindfulness. It's mindfulness knowing something else. So even I had this moment which I write about of I could feel this. There was all this drilling going on, and it suddenly struck me after about 10 minutes that the tooth had been taken out months ago. So what were they drilling? And there was this moment where I realized it was my bone, it was my jawbone that was being drilled into. I'm used to having my teeth drilled into, but yeah. So, and so it's that sort of moment. It's like, oh, and it was just fascinating. The whole experience was really fascinating. So, I think not arguing with reality is like another facet of acceptance of what's happening. And as I say, it's not passivity. It's not saying that we don't need to act at times. But we accept the experience that's happening in the moment. And that acceptance helps us see it a bit more clearly. It's just fear in the mind. It's just resistance in the mind. It's just the bone being drilled into in this moment. Acceptance of that. So I think there's something else that helps contentment, which is to do with being satisfied with simplicity often. Can the experience that we're having be enough? There's a Roshi, I'm not quite sure I say his name right. I'm not even sure if it's a male or female. Jan Chosen Bays Roshi. And they say, we have to study satisfaction, simple satisfaction, sitting and asking, what more do I need in this moment? Or asking, what is satisfying right now? And they go on to say that people become noticeably happier. It's been proven that that's the case, that actually happiness arises from being able to genuinely be satisfied with what's happening. And often it's not, the great moments are, well, there's a lot of other moments in between the really great moments, are there? There's ordinary moments, or there's dull moments, or there's unpleasant moments. But actually just being able to be satisfied with whatever experience is happening. And it leads to happiness. So the fourth thing, last thing, and then I'll say a little bit more about the book. What is the mind knowing? So this is the quality of sampajanya, or clearly knowing. And I think the relationship between mindfulness and wisdom perhaps strongest in this one. And this is illustrated in the Pali Canon by a little story, or I think it's a metaphor or a simile, one of the two, that the Buddha uses to describe the relationship between mindfulness and wisdom. And he says, mindfulness is like the neck of an elephant, and wisdom is the equivalent of the head of the elephant. So mindfulness supports wisdom in the same way that the neck supports the head on the elephant. I like to go a little bit further. I don't know if the Buddha would agree or not, but I think there's all sorts of other things happening, an interrelationship between the neck and the head. In terms of muscles, sinews, ligaments, blood vessels, there's a lot that's going on. There's a lot of sort of stuff. And I think that relationship between mindfulness and wisdom is the same. There's a lot of interrelationship happening. And I think it shows up in many different ways. I think the ways that the wisdom practice shows up here, and I've just gone into, I've gone into the different ones in the book, particularly in chapter 4, when I'm talking about right view or Dharma, bringing a Dharma perspective to our experience. And then again in chapter 7, I think I'm talking about wisdom and delusion. Anyway, how we recognize moments of wisdom, but equally important and probably more frequent, how we recognize delusion working in the mind. How we recognize this quality of moha is the word for ignorance or delusion. There's a difference, I think, between when we're primarily using mindfulness and when we're using mindfulness with this stronger wisdom dimension in it. And I want to just try and give you a few examples of that. The teacher I sit with in Burma, U Tejaniya, he uses a word which I think is a traditional phrase of satipanya. Satipanya. So mindfulness and wisdom. He writes it mindfulness just with a little plus and then wisdom or awareness plus wisdom. So satipanya. So it's when you've got those two things that they're not separate, but they are working together. So sati or satipanya. So I think perhaps a moment of mindfulness. I mean, you could try this now if you like. You can just let your gaze move away from the screen if you want, and just look at something. And be aware of the colors and the shapes. And maybe the awareness also, perhaps you're clearly knowing the concept. You're knowing that what it is that you're looking at conceptually, without trying really. But we can be aware. We can be mindful of all those things: the colors, the shapes, the concepts. Satipanya, if you like, mindfulness and wisdom, could be that you're aware that seeing is happening. You're aware that seeing is a process happening in the mind. The nature of the experience is simply that seeing is happening. So with the satipanya, you're less focused on the object, and you're more oriented to the process of what's happening in your own body and mind. So that's one example. Okay, so let's do another one. So just sitting where you're sitting, aware of sensation somewhere in the body. And perhaps just let your attention settle. Well, it might not settle, it might move around, but it might, it's fine if it's either moving around or in one place. Whichever way it is, you'll notice sensations, maybe some sort of tingling. Again, you might notice the mind automatically assigns some sort of concept to it's the hand, or it's the foot, or it's the chest, whatever it is. Or there's a sense of the clothes touching skin. So we can be mindful of all those things. Okay, so then satipanya, mindfulness and wisdom. Look at one facet, again, a different facet. So you can be aware of how you're relating to those particular sensations. You can be aware of if there's any sort of liking or involvement or even wanting more, or there's a sense of not wanting. There's more of a sense of aversion, or perhaps it's quite neutral, but you can recognize again that process in the mind of how you're relating to any given experience. Okay, so last one. So this is maybe connected with thoughts. So yeah, again, it's a bit hard on screen, but just let your mind relax and notice if there are any thoughts in the mind. So you may be aware of the content of the thoughts that are happening, or you might be aware of the thought simply as a thought in the mind, relatively free from some sort of personal identification with it. So I think with thoughts, maybe there's quite a spectrum of we might be really caught up in the content of our thoughts and what we call a story, or we might be able to just have some glimmer of recognizing this is a thought happening in the mind, and I think we can have more or less sort of identification with thinking, with a thought simply as a thought arising in the mind, and not identified with it not being personal to me, but simply an arising, a moment of experience arising in the mind. So how we know what's happening makes all the difference, actually. The degree of identification with something makes a lot of difference. So in this chapter on right view, chapter 4, I've got both theory and quite practical ways to have this helpful Dharma perspective on our experience. So what else is in the book? Just coming to the end now. So chapter 5, the subtitle of the book, Ending Suffering Through Attention, Curiosity and Wisdom. So the whole of the Buddha's teachings directed towards ending dukkha, ending suffering. And so I take a look at that in chapter 5, which is called The Cycle of Suffering. Looking at dukkha itself, but also looking at craving and aversion as two of the main culprits, if you like, and the main ways that we sort of try and strategize our way out of suffering, often not very successfully, or in a very short-term way. So each chapter has got a link to a recorded meditation. And each chapter has also got one of these mindful life moments, which I'll as I said, how I work with my practice. And then each one has also got usually a couple of exercises, just written exercises you can do in your own time, just to, again, to just try and unpack a bit more experientially what I've written about in the chapter. So I quite often get asked about the title. I get asked about uncontrived mindfulness, and does that mean that there can be a mindfulness that's contrived? And so I thought I would just read you a little bit of what I wrote in that section, which comes towards the end of the book. But I think maybe just to say, in relation to contrived mindfulness, I think perhaps there are two ways of looking at that. And one is that we've all, I would imagine, have had the experience of mindfulness feeling a little bit contrived, or feeling like we're doing something that perhaps sometimes comes when we're trying a little bit too hard. We're doing mindfulness rather than simply being mindful, being aware. So it can feel almost a bit constricting. So there's that experience of contrived mindfulness, feeling a bit contrived. I think there's also a more sort of wholesome way, if you like, when we're putting in effort, we're putting in personal effort, we're keeping trying. In a way, we're building up a certain amount of momentum in our practice. It's a bit like riding a bike or being on roller skates, and you need to put things into place. You need to keep remembering, you need to keep reminding yourself initially. So you do need to do some things in order to build some momentum, to, if you like, for things to run on their own steam a little bit more. And when they start to run on their own steam, that's one of the ways I'm talking about uncontrived mindfulness. But there are others, so you just read what I've written. When mindfulness starts to work on its own and we let go of controlling awareness in ever more subtle ways, the body and mind can start to relax deeply. There's often a significant decrease in mental and physical tension as the urge to direct and try greatly lessens. It can be a time when students recognize how much personal energy they're still using, despite having reduced a lot of unnecessary effort. This is a delicate point in practice where we switch from relying on personal effort to sustain awareness, to trusting awareness and right view to do their jobs without us interfering. As mindfulness working with right view become increasingly strong factors in the mind, they need very little prompting or reminding to keep going. Interest in the present moment is naturally there, along with ease and calm in the observing mind. When we no longer need to put much personal effort into sustaining awareness, and we know that it's there much of the time, we can say there is momentum in practice. We can contrast uncontrived mindfulness with our general mode of being, where we are continually fabricating or contriving our experience into a solid and whole sense of self. What is fabricated is a small world around a self-referential center. Uncontrived mindfulness, on the other hand, naturally re-arises moment after moment, allowing experience to simply unfold. There is nothing to hold on to. Awareness has become uncontrived and unprompted, imbued with the wisdom factors of mind. The more consistently we can keep up this type of awareness working with wisdom, increasingly the mind will naturally know the nature of whatever is happening. If we can keep recognizing the nature of experience over time, there comes a point when it becomes impossible to misunderstand in our usual ways. The work of the Dharma will be done. So I'll leave it there. Perhaps a little bit more than I meant to. So maybe let's have a leg stretch now rather than later. So maybe just a couple of minutes to stand up, move around, and then we'll sit. I'll lead us into a sit. Good. Just sitting as comfortably as you can. And before we go into perhaps our habitual ways of approaching meditation, they might be good habits, but sometimes it can just be helpful to even positive habits can be a little bit constricting if we're not aware of them. So maybe don't immediately close your eyes, or perhaps just checking out in your being what feels a natural way to become present to this moment. In fact, where is your attention already going? So we have this faculty of attention. That's moving into our environment, moving throughout our experience all the time. When we're present, we can notice it more clearly. So just sitting in this relaxed, natural way. With your eyes open or closed. Resting back or settling back. No need to reach out to experience that's being seen or heard or felt. It can all be experienced from just where you are. So you might find it helpful to just spend a couple of minutes just really settling the attention within the body. Noticing where it goes. Pulsing in the arm, pressure in the legs, it doesn't matter what's happening or where the attention is going. It's simply the job of mindfulness, of awareness, to accompany attention. Perhaps the attention goes towards sounds. Sounds in the environment. Sounds within your room or within your own body. Notice if there's any reaching out towards sounds, sort of mental reaching. And perhaps accompanied by physical tension. If you notice that, just settling back. And remembering that touching hands, how much energy or effort does it take to simply be aware of the sounds naturally occurring? Hearing is happening all on its own. We just need to be present to those moments. And sometimes with this type of receptive practice, you might find the question arising, but what should I do? actually what's helpful is to notice what the mind and body are already doing. Just being aware of that. Being with the simplicity of that. A simplicity of sensations, sounds, perhaps seeing, and perhaps you find the mind naturally anchoring around particular sensations, perhaps body sensations, perhaps the sensations of the breath moving through the body. Sometimes the mind finds greatest ease and contentment with an anchor to one particular aspect of experience. And at other times that ease can come from opening up to whatever arises. Body, sound, breath, and what's happening in the mind, what we call mind. Thoughts, images, perceptions. The faculty of mindfulness or awareness. An aspect of mind. And the mental quality of attention. Every single moment being drawn to something in our experience. And noticing any enjoyment, any appreciation or contentment that arises from simply being with what's actually happening. Or contentment growing from more moments of mindfulness. Simply relaxing into awareness, relaxing into presence.